I chose to start with Misery because it's one of my favorites, The Shining is why I wanted to do this series. The novel is among King's best, and the Kubrick film is highly regarded and an iconic film even to those who have never read the novel. There's also a lot to be said in regard to how the film stands up as an adaptation. So let's dig in! As much as King is regarded as a horror writer, I can't say I find most of his books that scary. The Shining, however, definitely lives up to the genre. Between the remnants all over the hotel and Danny's visions of what's to come, King builds up such a mounting sense of dread that makes you both eager to turn the page and afraid to find out what's going to happen next. Kubrick's film does the same, with its slow sweeping camera movements, long-held face shots, and eerie soundtrack. While Kubrick repeatedly made frequent phone calls to King while making the movie, King was not happy with the way it turned out. His opinion was that his story was about a good man being corrupted by the evil spirits that lurk inside the hotel, and he didn't think the film represented that at all. I'm inclined to agree with him. From the moment we first see Jack in the film, he's wearing Nicholson's characteristic smirk. While the Ullman in the book is hostile and expresses his feelings strongly that he doesn't want a family staying here after the last family ended up a murder-suicide, this Ullman is friendly and welcoming. So the devil smile Nicholson wears the whole time makes him seem more like crazy waiting to happen. You kind of have to wonder why this Ullman would hire him. I'm also not sure if the scene where Wendy tells the doctor about Danny's accident has enough weight to it to properly set up these characters. Duvall performs it well, sounding like a woman who has excused away abuse like so many battered wives do, but the changes made here make the situation different. In the book, Jack breaks Danny's arm rather than just dislocating his shoulder, which is a much more severe injury. But the problem is really with Wendy's reaction. Wendy is a much stronger character in the book, who's willing to stand up to Jack and is very concerned about what's happening. The only reason she doesn't leave is because she has a difficult relationship with her mother and she's afraid to go home. But divorce is frequently on her mind and she's very concerned about the safety of her son.
How did he manage to do that? Well, it was just one of those things, purely an accident.
Now it makes sense that Wendy's going to downplay the situation to a doctor. It's not like she's talking to a close friend. I feel like we should have seen a moment between Jack and Wendy where she stands up for herself about what's going on. And then there's the problem of Danny. The book is titled The Shining and not The Overlook for a reason. This is a book primarily about a little boy of 3 who has powers that allow him to hear and see things he doesn't fully understand yet. His life was already difficult and confusing, having parents who both came from abusive backgrounds and one who was an alcoholic on top of that. His dad lost his job due to his temper, and he was moved halfway across the country, and then he's brought to this place where people like him can see things others can't. And his shine is turned up to 11, meaning it's far worse for him than anyone else who has his abilities. Movie Danny is identical to him on paper, but performance is everything. And even bumping his age up to 6 doesn't help the fact that we're dealing with a child actor with very limited range. I read that Kubrick picked Danny Lloyd because of his ability to concentrate. If you know anything about Kubrick's film style, that was essential, as the man was notorious for filming scenes over and over again, sometimes dozens of times in a row, until he got it right. The problem is that Danny Lloyd is just not much of an actor. Most of the time he looks sad, which is okay, but his delivery of his lines is completely flat, and I can't help but think that their brevity was done intentionally. He can also look scared really well, but that's pretty much where his talent ends. As such, the only things we really learn about Danny are people talking about him or at him rather than anything he does. I think Stephen King's point is best made in the scene where Jack and Danny are alone together. We hear over and over again in the book about how close they are. Wendy is frequently jealous of their bond. But here, Danny sits stone-faced on his father's lap, and is only there because his father commanded it. And this Jack once again looks like a grinning devil waiting to strike. It goes against the Jack of the book completely, who had to be seduced by a web of lies, painful memories of his own father, and magically created alcohol in order to ever go after his son. But while this moment fails to adapt the book properly, it still sets up the mounting dread for what's coming in the film beautifully. And really, that one element is the only major misstep that the film makes as an adaptation. There are minor differences, like the hedge animals that moved in the book being turned into a maze. But realistically, moving hedge animals really wouldn't have worked in 1980, and the maze serves as a great climax to the film, better than just running around the third floor of the hotel. The room that contains the old woman was changed from 217 to 237 because the hotel they used for exterior shots didn't want them to use a room number of one of their actual rooms. The temperamental boiler from the book is dropped, allowing for a much creepier ending. The one change I find the most disappointing is Dick Halloran's fate. I have a soft spot for Scatman Crothers as it is, and while the Halloran in the book does fall prey to some heavy stereotyping, he's still a very likable character who has no real part in this, but chooses to be a hero anyway. It's a great shock moment in the movie, but knowing that he got to survive the book makes his ending particularly bittersweet. And there's also a lot of things that the film does right. The words Jack says to Lloyd the bartender are taken directly from the novel, and Nicholson brings them to life in an amazing way.
That's swell. I like you, Lloyd. I always liked you. You were always the best of them. Best goddamn bartender from Timbuktu to Portland, Maine. Or Portland, Oregon, for that matter.
Thank you for saying so.
Here's to 5 miserable months on the wagon and all the irreparable harm that it's caused me.
While they failed at showing any subtleness earlier in the film, once his madness is unleashed, Nicholson is absolutely fantastic. This is a guy you want to get as far away from as possible because he will snap at any moment. Duvall also does Scared excellently, and that moment of Jack breaking through the bathroom door is notable as much for her shocked reaction as it is for his classic line. And the creepiness of the hotel is executed beautifully. Those wonderfully creepy girls holding hands and staring at you, the blood gushing from the elevator, the man in the dog suit, the injured guest, and the old woman. Oh man, the old woman. I dreaded reading that scene in the book, and I was so thoroughly disgusted watching the scene in the film. Add to it the strong colors of the sets and the way Kubrick frames the shots, and it all just builds a great spooky atmosphere. So normally this is the part where I tell you whether or not I think the film is a good adaptation, but frankly, I'm a bit divided on that. I can see the point that King was making, but the fact is that the Jack in the book is a deeply flawed man himself. While there are tender moments between the family, he's also very grouchy and short-tempered with them most of the time, and he falls for the hotel's tricks rather easily. The main difference is that he does manage to snap out of it toward the end in order to help Danny and Wendy escape. If Nicholson would have toned it down just a little bit in those early scenes, I think this would have made a much better adaptation. I should state that I don't think it was Nicholson failing at the role as much as it was Kubrick telling him to act that way. There are a lot of theories out there on just what exactly Kubrick was trying to do with this film. I recommend checking out the new documentary Room 237 if you're interested in hearing some of them. But I'll ask you, do you think it's a good adaptation of the book? I think most of us would agree that it's an excellent film regardless. King's dissatisfaction with the film led to a 1997 miniseries adaptation, and I'll be taking a look at that next time.
you.